that are actually holding back our growth. And with that, I'll hand over to Chris to pass a few more remarks about the detail.
Thank you, Prime Minister. As I think we all know, New Zealand has a massive infrastructure deficit. Estimates vary, but it's around $100 billion or so. To put that into context, it's 80 transmission gully motorways. It's also 3 times the size of our entire school property portfolio, 8 times the size of our hospital network. Our infrastructure deficit is a major drag on productivity and on growth. And to fix it, the government has a massive program of infrastructure investment over the next 5 years. But we can't buy our way out alone. Instead, we need to patch the leak in the leaky bucket by using every tool in the toolbox. And the government has, as I've talked about before, an ambitious program around all of those things. We need to embrace market-led proposals when investors come to us with ideas, which is why we released guidelines on that last year. We need to improve the ways we fund and finance infrastructure, making better use of PPPs and strategic leasing to ensure every dollar of public and private capital is being put to its highest value use. We've recently released a funding and financing framework. We need to think longer term about our infrastructure priorities while we're working on a 30-year national infrastructure plan, which will be released later this year. And of course, Fast Track, which started life on Friday last week to cut through the red and green tape holding us back. We're committed as a government to using every tool in the toolbox to stop our infrastructure projects getting stuck in regulatory purgatory and to start getting spades in the ground. Greater foreign investment and more partnerships with the government are an important opportunity that can allow us to move ahead with those big projects that will create jobs and growth for New Zealanders and a better quality of life. So, the summit will provide an important opportunity to showcase our infrastructure vision, highlight upcoming investment and development opportunities to around 100 leaders from global investment and construction companies. It's on the 13th and 14th of March, as the Prime Minister has said. Attendance is by invitation only, and I can report to you that interest is so high we are currently oversubscribed for the summit. As well as showcasing upcoming infrastructure opportunities, it's also going to highlight changes in policy, regulation and legislation that we're already making to make it easier to do business here, and it will also highlight investment opportunities in a range of growth sectors like renewable energy, clean tech, aquaculture, the resources sector, for example, and indeed the Maori economy. I'm going to be presenting at the summit alongside many of my Cabinet colleagues. We're looking forward to showing the world that New Zealand is a country worth investing in, and that we are open for business and that we are going for growth. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Chris. And just a quick word on the Q1 action plan for 2025 that we've also released today. The plan obviously has a strong focus about boosting growth by attracting more overseas investment, as well as the summit. Some of the initiatives we're focusing on this quarter are upgrading our visa settings, delivering smarter regulation for our agriculture sector, and obviously reshaping our planning rules so that people can actually get stuff done in this country. We have hit the ground running this year with some of the priorities in our Q1 plan already ticked off, including allowing digital nomads into New Zealand and laying the groundwork for AI to improve public services. While the focus is on growth, our commitment to restoring law and order and delivering better public services also remains. We'll soon pass legislation to ensure appropriate consequences for criminal offending, progress legislation to crack down on street racing, and publish our turnaround plans for the health sector to ensure that New Zealanders see better results from the government's record spend on healthcare. We have a big year ahead of us. We have a lot to say yes to, including growth, yes to investment, and yes to building a more prosperous future for Kiwis. And now we're happy to take your questions. Sorry, Jason.
You talked about public capital. Is there any countries that are off limits for investing in New Zealand?
Look, no, we're country agnostic. Obviously, we'll have our standard safeguards in place as commercial deals are hammered out. But what this summit's about is actually connecting an investor community internationally that is very open to investing in New Zealand, a government that's very welcoming of that investment, and actually introducing them to the investment opportunities that are here.
So you're not worried about Chinese capital coming to fund New Zealand infrastructure projects?
As I said, we're country agnostic, but what we do have is obviously very strong safeguards in place to protect our national interests.
Will the government be making any contributions?
Sorry?
Will the government be making any contributions to the cost of these people coming in?
No, they are coming here on their own steam. Obviously there's the cost of holding the event, but that's funded from within our baselines.
Prime Minister, have you spoken to David Seymour about trying to drive a vehicle up the steps of Parliament today?
No, I'm not that interested in political sideshows. I'm much more interested in getting this economy growing, and that's what I've been focusing on today.
Do you think a Cabinet Minister driving up the steps of Parliament is acceptable conduct?
Well, look, those are issues for David Seymour to address with the Speaker, I would imagine. What I'd say to you is I'm just not interested in those political sideshows, as I'd say them. I want to get things done. I'm very, very focused on making sure we drive economic growth in this country. Sorry, Jenna, carry on.
In 2003, when Shane Ardern drove up the steps, the police charged him with disorderly conduct. You could have a minister up on charges for driving a vehicle up the steps of Parliament, and you're not worried about it?
Well, those are issues for David Seymour and Jerry Brownlee to talk through, given Jerry Brownlee's as Speaker responsible for the Parliament. All I'm saying is, for me, I'm very much focused on getting into the job at hand, which is growth, growth, growth.
Are you saying the Minister was engaging in a political sideshow?
Well, just saying to you, frankly, today, I've been very focused on making sure we are doing everything we can to set up for a successful investment summit, making sure that we're actually opening up our visa settings as we talked about yesterday. On Friday, we opened up our fast-track consenting process. Those are the things that I've been concerned about.
Is he not focused on his work?
Again, for me, I know what I'm focused on, that's growing the New Zealand economy.
Have you spoken to him just on David Seymour? Have you spoken to him about his letter of support to Polkinghorne?
Well, look, I mean, what I'd say is, as I said yesterday, public confidence in the justice system relies on making sure that actually, police investigations and political intervention are separated. That's really a critical part of our system. Personally, I thought sending the letter was ill-advised. He's aware of my views on that. But as you all know, he wasn't a Cabinet Minister at the time.
So what happens now? What happens next?
Sorry?
Does anything happen next, or is, as far as you're concerned, is the situation done?
Well, as I said, there's been no breach of the Cabinet Manual. He didn't do this as a minister. I just think sending the letter was ill-advised. That's my personal view on it. But ultimately, there are questions for him. Sorry, Joe.
In addition to sending the letter, which you have acknowledged is ill-advised, also in the Tim Jago case, he was in the situation where the ACT Party instructed someone who was making quite a serious allegation to go speak to a lawyer that they referred, as opposed to instructing them to go speak to the police. Are you concerned about the political radar, the judgment of your soon-to-be Deputy Prime Minister when it comes to who the correct people are that should be dealing with these things, and the separation of powers as well? Yeah,
well, look, I mean, that's why I made the comments I did, which is that having police investigations completely separate from political interventions is a critical part of our system. It's absolutely critical, whether you're an MP or a minister. But in terms of, that's why I think sending the letter was, as I say, ill-advised. But this didn't happen. This happened before we formed government, before he was a minister. My view is that, this didn't happen as a minister. So, from that point of view, my job as Prime Minister is to hold my minister's behaviour and their conduct to account. This didn't happen while he was a minister.
In terms of the letter, he says that on the police website it says to people, if you've got a problem, then go and speak to your local MP, and he says there was just advocating on behalf of a constituent. Do you buy that?
Well, there's a very fine line to walk. All electorate offices up and down this country will have issues where of different nature about constituents' engagement with police. But I think ultimately it's about finding the balance in that line and making sure that you're not interfering in an investigation or you're keeping the political interference separate from the police investigation, as it should be.
If one of your ministers attempted to drive a vehicle up the steps of Parliament, would you have words with them?
I possibly. Well, again, I'm sorry, but I haven't been following the story of today. I know it's a big deal for the folk here in Parliament. Ultimately, it's an issue for.
No, I
get it, but what I'm saying to you is actually it's an issue for Jerry Brownlee and David Seymour to work out, given Jerry Brownlee's responsible for the Parliament.
If David Seymour had written that letter while being a minister, would have you dismissed him?
Well, it's a hypothetical. He didn't write it as he didn't write it as a minister, and I'm just saying to you, my personal view is it's ill-advised. Whether you're an MP or a minister, it's important to make sure that there's a separation between investigations and politicians.
Line. Did he cross that line?
Sorry?
You said it's a fine line. Did he cross
No, I said that as constituent MPs advocating for your constituents, there is always a fine line to make sure that you're not impeding on that investigation. I just think sending the letter in the way that it was ill-advised.
Did you know about the letter before it hit the headlines, or were you Was that the first time that you read about it?
My office had received the letter, I think, just before the story broke. I got a high-level readout of it. It's very similar to what was reported.
Just on the Cook Islands.
Yes.
Kiribati has had aid money withheld while they try and work out New Zealand tries to work out some of the issues going on here.
Yep.
And the issue being transparency on a number of matters. What are you going to do about the Cook Islands situation? Because it's, again, an issue of transparency and communication. And at the moment, you've now had the Prime Minister go to China without fulfilling a request from the Foreign Minister. Are you going to consider withholding money, sanctions, anything like that to deal with this situation?
Well, look, I mean, as I've said, is that, we have a very good relationship with the Cook Islands and its people. We have a rather unique constitutional arrangement about free association for the last 60 years. We have real points of difference between the New Zealand and Cook Islands government, as we've talked about, around passports and around international agreements. We know under those constitutional arrangements, it's important that there is total transparency about those. And in this case, we don't feel that that's happened, and that's why we've talked about that publicly, and the Foreign Minister has done so. We'll wait and see, and we'll see what comes back.
What is the threshold there, though? Because you have acted in the case of Kiribati, and there has been money that is now being reviewed and aid money is being put on hold. So at what point, or what is the threshold for the Cook Islands in terms of actually some sort of punishment?
Well, again, given we haven't seen this purported agreement, we need to make sure we wait and actually see it, and we'll make our judgments after that. Sorry, Thomas.
If the agreement is against New Zealand's national interest, what will you do?
Well, again, that's hypothetical. We haven't seen the agreement. We need to wait and see and actually be able to see it. And once we see it, we'll make our assessment.
What's wrong with Cook Islands pursuing an economic agreement with China if New Zealand has an economic agreement with China, as Mark Brown has said?
Well, what is important is that there is transparency. In this case, there hasn't been, and that's all we're asking for. And so that's been the nature of the conversations, leader to leaders, but also officials to officials, and that's what we're expecting. At the moment, we need to wait and see what the agreement actually does or doesn't look like.
Has Mark Brown just gone rogue?
Sorry?
Has Mark Brown just gone rogue?
No,
What do you think's prompted this?
We have a very good relationship with the Cook Islands and also its people, but we have points of difference, as we've highlighted here, around passports and around international agreements. We have an obligation under our constitutional arrangement to make sure around issues of defence and security that we're very transparent about all of that. We need to wait and see what has actually been agreed or not agreed, and then we'll make our judgments after that.
We've got a very good relationship with them.
Sorry?
You say we've got a very good relationship with them, but haven't we completely dropped the ball here? We had no idea what was going on. Winston Peters still has no idea what was going on. How out of the loop is New Zealand in terms of what the Cook Islands is even up to at the moment?
That's why, under questioning, you've actually seen him say that we expect transparency, and he's calling that out, and that's what we're saying, and that's why you do have a dispute between the two countries.
But is our finger actually on the pulse when it comes to the Pacific Islands? Because there's been a lot of rhetoric over the last year about how we've been there so many times and we've visited all these countries that nobody else had visited for years and all the rest of it. We've now got a situation where one of our closest partners, the Cook Islands, has gone off and is not responding to any communication from our Foreign Minister about what sort of an agreement they're doing with China. So actually, how good is that relationship?
I think our relationships have been strengthened over the last 15 months for sure, no doubt about it. But what we have here is a dispute.
The result of that is we now have a situation where we don't know what the Prime Minister of the Cook Islands is up to.
What we know is that we don't see eye to eye on these two issues. Passports we've actually dealt with, and the Prime Minister's conceded that he won't be progressing passports, which is right, given the nature of our constitutional arrangements. With respect to the agreement, we'll have to wait and see what that looks like, and we'll make our decision after that.
Regarding migrant visa
Sorry,
changes,
Tom.
regarding migrant visa changes, the
But can you
Australian...
speak up a bit? I can't hear you. You've got a very soft voice, my friend.
Prime Minister, thank you. The Australian government had a similar type of migrant visa last year. They dropped it after the Aussie Productivity Commission said that they hadn't provided a single economic benefit. Is that a warning sign that your changes might not work?
No, what a load of rubbish. This is actually going to be a very good thing for New Zealand. We have an active investor visa that Australia and the UK don't have anything like this. We have huge interest that has built up even before we made the announcement yesterday about people who want to invest in New Zealand. To give you a feel for it, I think in the last, certainly the 2-year period, there was about 13 projects of about $70 million worth of value only that was actually actioned under the old regime. Pre that, it was over the same 2-year period, it was about $2.2 billion. So we are missing out on a huge amount of investment. And the incredible thing with this class of investors, and I met many of them yesterday, and I met many of them over the last 15 months or so, is that they, once they get here and they have trusted networks and they build relationships and they get familiar with the situation, they've invested up to another $1.7 billion in further investments. So, this is a really positive move for us. It's one of many things that we're doing. As you can see today by announcing the investment summit, it's also about the investor visa class. It's also about the free trade deals. It's also about fast track. It's and. It's yes, in order to actually make sure that we're doing everything we can. Job number one, power up the New Zealand economy, get a stronger, bigger economic engine in place so that we can help Kiwis get ahead, so we can get better public services.
The government is introducing those extra checks when it comes to where those migrants aren't going to be investing that money. Can you explain how that process is going to work?
Well, again, I'll direct you to the Immigration Minister if you want the detail, or we missed you yesterday. But what I'd say is that this is a very clean and simple and clear, two-speed investor category. Where you can bring in $5 million with higher risk investment for a period of 3 years, or you come in with $10 million for lower risk investment. And there's clear criteria about what asset classes you need to invest in order to do that. Invest New Zealand will make sure that that is actually the case. But importantly, by the time we're now putting in place Invest New Zealand to go out and attract foreign direct investment in the order that Chris and I are planning through the investment summit, coupled with the investor class, by the time we actually have mechanisms like 30-year pipeline of infrastructure, and we have our National Infrastructure Funding and Financing company in place, those are the mechanisms we need to be able to activate and actually get the money into New Zealand and actually working for New Zealanders. And I think all of that's a pretty exciting development, as you saw yesterday.
Sorry, with the investment summit, you're going to have some deals ready on the table?
Well, really, I'll let Chris talk to that. Yep.
There will be investment opportunities at the summit, but more importantly, I think it's talking about the pipeline of investment opportunities into the future. We've got big ambitions as a government around infrastructure more broadly. I talked about the health infrastructure pipeline. Obviously, we've got the Roads of National Significance program being delivered through NZTA and others. So we've got big ambitions as a government around infrastructure investment, and so the summit will highlight and showcase the opportunities that will come in the forthcoming years, because we're not in a position to, and nor will the market want us to, drop out, dozens of opportunities right now, because the market couldn't handle that, and nor could we build all of those things. So it's about establishing a clear and consistent and stable pipeline of opportunities, and the summit is the start of that investment piece. So there will be some opportunities at the summit, but it's more about what are the opportunities that will be there in 3 years, 5 years, even 10 years, because we want to attract new investors into New Zealand and also new construction companies into New Zealand to say, you know what, I'm going to turn up to New Zealand and I'm going to start building some stuff because they've got a government that's welcoming of me. I've got some partners I want to work with. They've got great skilled capital, skilled labour that I can work with. And it's a great place to do business, the rule of law, all of the things that are really important. But what's been lacking in the last few years is those investment opportunities and some of the regulatory and policy settings that we've spent a lot of time over the last year working on, things like fast track, market-led proposals, foreign investment rule changes, investor visas. All of that stuff is really important as well.
Some of this kind of lay the groundwork for some of the unsolicited bit stuff. We've got these motorways coming up. If you guys think you've got a plan, biff it in and we'll have a look.
Well, you'll wait and see what happens at the summit, but as I say, there will be investment opportunities presented at the summit and around the time of the summit, but there will also be a showcasing of the pipeline of opportunities that will be coming over the forthcoming years. And we have an unsolicited bid or market-led proposal guidance out there now that is administered by the National Infrastructure Funding and Financing Company that went live on the 1st of December from memory. And so we are open for business right now. If there's an investor out there or a group of investors who've got bright ideas for things that they would like to fund in New Zealand or would like funding for, that they think would add value to the New Zealand market, they can approach the New Zealand government right now. They have a single point of contact through the National Infrastructure Funding and Financing Company. And we will get on with the job of processing those. Not all of them will be accepted. It's early days, but we are interested in bringing capital and talent to this country so that we can go for growth.
Sorry, Luke.
And what does a successful summit look like?
Well, it's actually not about the summit per se, it's about what the summit leads to. And so what we've discovered over our travels over the last 15 months, as many of you have experienced, is that when we sit and talk with investors, which I do in every location I go to internationally, there is now a real openness to invest in New Zealand, but they don't know what are the investment opportunities that are here. Equally, you now have a government that's put the settings and some of the mechanisms in place that we desperately need to be able to convert that investment. And really what the summit is about is the beginning of actually making them aware of investment opportunities, raising their interest in New Zealand. And I know that we also have other investors that will be coming through the country after the summit as well, wanting to explore in some detail opportunities as well. So really what this is about is we need investment, because when we get investment and capital, that leads to higher incomes and more jobs, and that's a good thing for Kiwis who win out of the back of this. But we also think there's opportunities for partnerships in some of our fast-growing sectors, and certainly for iwi, being a key partner in many of these opportunities to participate in infrastructure development as well.
What projects are investment ready at the moment? What infrastructure projects are investment ready?
Well, we'll detail that at the summit.
You don't get everything all at once, Talifa. You have to wait and see. But there'll be some investment opportunities at and around the summit.
So the north and...
There'll be some investment opportunities at and around the summit. But as I say, it's not just about the immediate, as in the next 6 months.
Yeah.
It's about the pipeline and showcasing to international investors that we are open for business and ready for their capital.
And just on Invest New Zealand,
sorry, just last question.
Yeah, just on Invest New Zealand, how is that not just adding more bureaucracy, having a new government agency trying to get investors into this country?
Well, look, we've looked all around the world. We've looked at other small advanced economies and asked how they've actually put it together. And we realise there's quite a different skill set at NZTE, which is about helping our New Zealand domestic firms sell their goods and products out into overseas markets and building that literacy of exports and market development from overseas. But it's quite a different skill set to actually sit down with overseas investors and actually make the connection to opportunities here in New Zealand. So that's why we've followed the Irish model. I'm just saying, if you put Invest New Zealand together, which is designed to be able to attract billions of dollars of foreign direct investment into New Zealand, we know that we sit at the bottom of the OECD, and we've done a poor job over a number of years, a number of decades, I'll put it to you, in attracting foreign direct investment. We need to be able to make the most of all that pension fund wealth that sits out there in the world that is awash with cash. We want to be able to make sure it needs a home, and we want to be able to make sure that we can bring some of that money here to New Zealand to benefit everyday Kiwis.
On foreign buyers, when I asked you at the National Caucus retreat where conversations were at the cabinet table around that, you said that there hadn't been any conversations since it was discussed as part of the coalition talks, and obviously New Zealand first ruled it out.
We have ongoing conversations.
Right, so what conversations have you been having, and are you any closer to reaching some agreement around that, and what sort of an arrangement could it look like in terms of thresholds or anything that...
Look, all I'm going to say is that we have ongoing conversations on that point. It's one piece of the investment puzzle that we need to be able to do, getting visa settings right, getting investors connected with opportunities. Yes, we can talk about foreign buyer ban and the ability to purchase houses in here. Those are ongoing conversations. When we've got something to say about it, we'll talk about it then.
Because when you talk to investors and lawyers and people who are sort of interested and tied up in this, they say that the tax component and the foreign buyers component are going to be the two sort of roadblocks if you don't do something about them. And Erica Stanford did acknowledge yesterday that there needed to be more work done around that. So the question I'm asking is, have you progressed anyway to coming to a conclusion about whether you're going to be able to do that?
We are progressing conversations on a range of issues, including some of those and others that you haven't raised, to make sure that we make this a very investment-friendly place, and we'll continue to do so.
Do you have a timeline on that? When will we...
Yeah, you can see we're announcing things each and every week, and if you notice that we announce Fast Track, we announce investors, and today we're announcing a summit.
Will we have something before the budget or at the budget on Joe's specific question around foreign
when we're ready to tell you, we'll tell you.
Back on the Cook Islands, is the problem not the Cook Islands government, but is it Mark Brown himself? Is he the issue, and are you worried about what is sometimes called elite capture?
Look, what we're focused on is making sure that any conversations we have from a leader-to-leader point of view is highly transparent. That's all we're asking for in the context of our constitutional arrangement with the Cook Islands, which is that we expect transparency and we expect discussion and consultation, and that's all we're laying down. And yes, we're a new government, but that's our expectation in our partnership with the Cook Islands, is that we should be straight up with each other about what we're doing.
Is the government having any conversations with China about this? Obviously, they're party to the agreement too, Are you what message are you giving China on this matter?
Well, again, our issue is with New Zealand and the Cook Islands, is that under our constitutional arrangements, we expect matters of defence and security to be transparently discussed between partners. That's all we're asking for here. So that's why there is a difference of opinion, and we're being very transparent about that with you. We're in the public domain, we're answering those questions, and we're being very clear with the Cook Islands as to what we expect them to deliver. Sorry, mate. Mark?
Different foreign affairs issue, but we talk a lot about rules-based international order.
Yeah.
In light of that, do you have any thoughts on the US president threatening to take, potentially by force, Greenland off of Denmark, the Panama Canal off of Panama? How does that fit in with New Zealand's interest in a rules-based international
order? No disrespect, but I won't be doing a running commentary on comments from the US president. I speak for New Zealand, and what I can say from a New Zealand perspective is we believe in the importance of the rules-based system. Wherever I go, I advocate very strongly for that, and I'll continue to do so.
Just regarding President Trump's tariffs.
Tom, can you speak up again?
President Trump's tariffs, Prime Minister. Are you going to look to seek any kind of exemption regarding our steel and aluminium, considering that could be implicated as a part of the reciprocal 25% tariffs?
Yeah, look, as I was coming down, I'm aware of the statement that the President's made about steel and aluminium at 25% tariffs. Frankly, let's just wait and see, and we'll deal with it then.
Are you going to seek an exemption, though, just yes or no?
Again, we'll wait and see what the actual proposal actually is versus, it's important we see what policy in detail gets implemented, given statements, as different from statements.
Isn't wait and see the general policy with Trump?
Sorry?
Isn't wait and see the general policy with Trump?
Well, again, I just say to you, I'm not here to comment on statements from the US president. He's elected on a platform. There's no surprises in some of the decisions that he's taking, but that's up to the American people and to him. What I'm advocating as Prime Minister of New Zealand is that I defend our national interests, and where I can, I advocate for the rules-based system, as I should.
Is there a world in which it is in New Zealand's national interest for the Cook Islands to sign an economic deal of any sort with China?
Well, again, we're making very clearly that we expect those conversations to be very transparent. We want to we need to see what is actually being discussed.
Conversations to be transparent, but is there a way that could be in New Zealand's national interest?
What's in New Zealand's national interest is to make sure we have a positive relationship with the Cook Islands. It's a special relationship, 60 years in the making, and it's important to us that we actually are transparent and honest as deep and trusted partners with each other.
They could tell you what's in that agreement, and if we don't like it, well, then what are we going to do? I mean, transparency only goes so far. It only concludes what is and isn't in it.
Yeah, again, we'll wait and see what is in an agreement or not in an agreement, and we'll work it out from there.
So that's the question then. Is there a world where what is in that agreement could be in New Zealand's national interest? What
we're saying is that we want to make sure that there is anything that's of a defence or security nature is obviously of great importance to New Zealand. It's captured in our our constitutional arrangements, that we talk very openly and transparently about that, and that's what we need to see. Okay, Dean, last question. Sorry, Thomas.
Would you be open to some of these investors who are visiting having connections to China's Belt and Road project, and if they were to invest in some of the projects that we've got, would you be happy with those projects being part of that project?
Well, again, as I've said before, we're country agnostic. Obviously, we have safeguards and around our national interests, and those will continue to be prosecuted and understood before any commercial deals are signed.
Do you think the Belt and Road initiative would trigger any of those safeguards?
Well, again, we will look at the deals as they come and as they are formed. It's all speculative and it's all premature to talk about things. We want to open up to as many countries as we possibly can. We're agnostic as where the money comes from. We need the investment, but we'll obviously make sure we've got safeguards and we're acting in our national interests.
Within the last couple of hours, there's been a poll that's come out that shows that 50% of New Zealanders think that we're on the wrong track, while I think about 34% of New Zealanders think that we're on the right track. Do you see that as an indictment on your government?
Well, what I see it is it's been a tough time for New Zealanders, and we've made some progress, as you've seen, with interest rate and tax relief and also inflation relief. You see rising, good levels of confidence around business, farmer, consumer confidence. As I've said in my State of the Nation speech, and as evidenced by the actions at the beginning of this year, that everything is focused on growth, growth, growth. The New Zealand people have been doing it tough. They've had a very, very tough summer. We've got a cost of living crisis. That's why we're trying to attract investment to this country. That's why we're trying to make sure we make it easier to get get things done and built. That's why we want our kids focused on being educated on the basics. So we're setting up the conditions for a great future, because we do have a great future. But I fully acknowledge it's a very difficult and challenging time for many New Zealanders. But the plan is beginning to work. We have some encouraging green shoots with respect to inflation and interest rates and confidence. But this year it's about growth and jobs, and that's really what our focus has to be as we work our way through that economic cycle and power ourselves out to consistent, steady economic growth. Okay. Sorry?
A statement's just dropped on the Here in KC inquiry, which was due to be announced in September 2024, and it's been pushed out by the Public Service Commission. Last week it got pushed out again. Whānau Ora Commissioning Agency and Waipiria Trust have just put out a statement saying that they had a copy of the embargoed report for 2 weeks. They're completely comfortable with it being released and can't understand why it hasn't been. And given that you put a timeline of September 2024 on it, why is it a case of this is continuing to be delayed? The Public Service Commissioner still hasn't released that report.
Well, look, the Public Service Commissioner will release it when he's ready. It's important that we take time and do the analysis properly, and importantly, if there's any findings coming through it, that we actually make sure that we've got an action plan that actually is implemented. So I'm going to leave that for the Public Service Commissioner to comment, and I'm sure he'll do that shortly. Okay, team, thanks so much. Appreciate your time.